Hi and welcome to Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem and today we're working with Starlight Witch. What an absolutely gorgeous collection. Not just for this spooky time of the year but for all year round. I adore everything. Let's head down to the board and take a look at some of the components you can find in this fantastic Starlight Witch collection. From the Starlit Garden collection featuring this impressive focal pendant, through to one of the most beautiful chains I've ever seen, double links all woven together, classically elegant gold and black cup chain. We've got little pendants, these are fantastic. We've got connectors, double loop on these textured moons. We've got a strand featuring peacock AB tones with two types of beads. These gorgeously perfectly formed seed beads and beautiful faceted rondelles. We have got two-tone shimmery magical beads. Look at that. We've got two-tone in gold and black. It looks like frosted honey in there. We've also got frosted black. These are enormous fun. Absolutely love this collection. One of my favourite strands is this. Now, I don't know what the material is, but it feels like it might be pyrite. They are utterly gorgeous, drilled through and really, really useful. We're going to use those in today's tutorial, where we're going to learn how to make this Starlit Garden pendant. We're going to start by creating the main form and drop of the pendant. If this is too much for you, you could just choose to have one bead up at the top instead. I'm going to be using my memory wire finishing pliers. You could, however, use your bail making pliers just to get that repeatable size of loop down at the bottom of the main pendant. I have 18 gauge round wire. This is medium temper, around about 15 inches or so. And what we're going to do now is just to warm through just in the middle of that wire, just to get it nice and fluid and ready to work. So to begin with, I'm going to use the small side. You could use the number 1 pin on your bail makers, or indeed you could just draw a line with marker pen on your round nose pliers to get that repeatable size. And I'm going to start about 1/3 of the way along that wire, just creating a loop. And you can just take the wires in opposite direction over that round form of choice. If I remove the pliers now, we're just going to repeat that 5 times. What you need to focus on is keeping a similar distance between those loops, so I'll just show you once more how you can achieve that. So if you put the pin into position, drop that down into the focal zone slightly, and then we're going to wrap that tail of wire all the way around. And as you can see at the moment, that's quite far apart. So if I decide that I want those two loops slightly closer together, pop the pin back in and just rotate that around until the loops sit exactly where I want them to. So continue until you have 5 loops, starting 1/3 in from one end of that wire. And then I'll show you how just to refine that to make them all look nice and neat. So as you can see at the moment, those loops are a little bit on the wonk, so let's get them nice and straight. What we're going to do to begin with is just bring them all so that they are flat to the desk at the same time, just by using a flat set of pliers like my bent chain nose pliers to make sure that all of those loops sit in the same orientation. So now it's a nice straight line. We just want to make sure that the top section stays straight as it moves along. So the easiest way to do that is to use the very tip of your chain nose pliers just to make sure that those loops are completely sealed. And then we're going to add a little bit of warmth to that form. Now normally we would do that by running the wire between thumb and forefinger, but once you've got loops in, that's just a little bit uncomfortable. So once that's nice and warm, I'm going to grab a round form. This one is 22mm or 0.87 of an inch, but you could use something like the lid of a lotion pot if you don't have access to a lovely wooden mandrel like this. We're going to use that to form a circle all the way around. So get those wires to cross over at the top, exactly as you did with the loops themselves. So once that's sitting nice and pretty and good and round, that's a little bit off round, so we're just going to re-warm that. A little bit of a warm through, and then make sure that those two wires cross over. In a moment we're going to use this round form to help us create a closed loop up at the top, so don't worry if that's a little bit out of shape at the moment. That's a little bit better already. So what I'm going to do is just to close that around the round form, pinch it firmly and decide where the upright on this section should be. Now that needs to be dead opposite the middle of your 5 loops. So if I just hold that in position, I'm going to take the shorter tail. One is ever so slightly shorter than the other. And I'm going to push that up so that it sits away at 90 degrees and opposite to that lowest loop. Then I'm going to pop our round form back into position and just hold that. Looking from above, you'll see that that is around about the right place for that angle to come away. So I'm just going to warm through the longer tail of wire and draw that around the upright to get a loop going. So once you've got that loop started off, you can refine that by pinching first with your fingers and then popping in with a set of pliers just to close that up. Then what we're going to do is just wrap around a couple of times to get a good strong wrapped loop. Pull that into position and then you can tighten that up. So at this stage we can take it away from the form and hopefully you've got a nice round pendant to begin with. So I'm just going to ensure that I'm happy with how that looks down at the bottom before I start adding on my chosen beads. Now you can have as few or as many as you like. I think I'm going to see if I can get all of the same beads on. So I'm going to start with the largest of my 3 chosen beads, which is one of these frosted, I imagine agates, might not be. And then I'm going to draw that around underneath the core wire. So it starts on top, goes to underneath, and I'm going to wrap around the core wire twice. If that's a little bit loose, you can push down from above until that sits nice and neat and tidy. Then I'm going to add in one of these gorgeous two-tone shimmery shiny beads. As I twist that in the light, you'll see why I love them so very much. Again, my wrapping wire is over the top of the core, so I'm going to draw that around to the side and underneath the core and then wrap twice. Once and twice, and then you can repeat up at the top with a 3rd bead if you like. I've gone for one of these AB coated peacock colour faceted rondelles. Push that down into position, and then I'm going to draw that again around the side of the bead from the top to underneath that core wire. I'm going to wrap twice up at the top there and then leave that sticking out for a second. What we need to do now is to create a simple bail up at the top. So if I hold across the form, push the wire forwards, and then you can use your favourite round form to create a wrapped loop. So I'm going to grab in number 4 on my bail makers to create a bail, draw that all the way around until you have a round form. Feel free to take as much time as you need to get this nice and neat and tidy. As you've seen me do this a couple of times, I don't want to bore you. So I'm going to draw that wire down until I've filled the gap, like so. Get that nice and neat and tidy, make sure everything is good and smooth, and then trim away the excess into your scrap pot and make sure that that sits flat against the core. We can then move to create a coil to sit up and over the top of our bail. So first thing to do is to make sure that the end is cut nice and flush, trim away any ragged excess, and then use your round nose pliers to create a spiral. Start near to the end of the wire, near to the tip of your pliers, and then begin to push that into a circular form, rotating with a pair of flat facing pliers, such as your bail makers, until you have a coil that sits against that core wire. Then what we're going to do is to push that up over the surface of that bail, so you have some extra added detail. Let's just push that flat for a second. That by itself is quite pretty, but what we're going to do is to add some dangly details. So I have chosen to work with these fantastic pyrite coloured beads. you will need a ball head pin for this part of the tutorial. What we're going to do is to first push the end up through the fatter side of that bead, and then we're going to grab in one of the seed beads that came on the strand with those faceted AB peacocks. Now I'm just going to sit that in the centre by offering it up underneath, and then we're going to push that head pin up through the upper hole on those beautiful pyrite colour beads. Pull that through and you've got yourself a nice little dangly. Now I chose to have a couple of different lengths involved because I think it looks very attractive. In one of these we're going to add it to a loop with one of the two-tone purple shiny beads, and then with 3 of them they're going to go directly onto the pendant form. So I will show you this just once. Grip across the top, make sure the head pin is all the way up, push the wire forwards, leaving yourself a small gap. We're going to create a loop with our memory wire finishing pliers or round nose pliers. Draw that all the way around. So we've created an open loop so far, and I'm going to add that into the centre of my pendant. Just push that until it sits into position. So you can see you've attached one loop through another loop. And then we're going to do a wrapped loop just here. So hold across that loop without putting any pressure on any of the crossing over wires. Draw the tail of wire around until you have at least 2 good turns, nice and firmly, before you trim away that excess. Head pins tend to be quite springy wire, so do make sure that you take a second to just push that end down nice and neat. Then you will need to repeat the exact same process but adding a loop in between. As you can see, I've added 2 further pyrite colour bead drops, and now we're just going to connect another one to match the extra I've popped here. 18 gauge round wire in a medium temper. And we're going to use one of those beautiful flashy purple beads. Let's grab those memory wire finishing pliers, or you can use your bail makers, and I'm going to create a small loop at one end by rotating those pliers around like so, and then pulling the wire away whilst holding with my chain nose pliers. Now sometimes the wire will just open up slightly, that's absolutely fine. You can take a second to just push that into position. What we're going to do now is add on the bead, like so, and in the same direction that the wire comes away, just outside that bead, we're going to pull the wire away at the other end. Now those 2 loops need to be in the same orientation and it will sit beautifully on the neckline. So let's grab those memory wire finishing pliers again and rotate the wire around until you get a second loop of a similar size. So there is a little bit of residue to cut away. It's always better to have a little bit spare than not quite enough. Trim that away at the point that the wire crosses that exit point. And then just reform that loop until it sits nicely. So on one side we're going to open the loop up and add in our pyrite colour bead drop, close that up, and then the other side we're going to link in to the remaining loop of our pendant design. So open that up sideways as if it's a jump ring, slide that into position, and then close it directly back up again. Whichever way you prefer to do this. Close that wire up neatly and give it a tiny squeeze to set that shape. And there you have your beautiful pendant design.